Welcome to the Mind Pillar. This is the PolyInnovator channel series around the 4 pillars philosophy. The Mind Pillar is your brain, right? It is how you think, what you think, how well you can think, how well you can remember things, and that's what we're going to get into today. It all starts with learning. Now, whenever you are trying to pursue any sort of knowledge, you have to start from the beginning. Just like the Feynman technique, breaking it down to the most smallest pieces. If you do not know that subject well enough, you are not able to break it down smaller and smaller and smaller. So the first thing is, what is it, right? What is the subject that you are learning? It is, I call it the micro what, because you just need to have a semblance of understanding about what it is about. And then this is what my blog post format is generally formatting. It's the Simon Sinek start with why. It's how I format most of my blog posts. Why, how, and what. And one thing that I've been realizing more and more when I make these posts, but even when I'm learning myself, is you want to bring that micro what first. So it's a little small what, then the why, then the how, and then the actual real what, like actually digging into it deeply. And by doing so, you understand a concept a lot more effectively and deeply. Simon Sinek talks about this. You start with the why, like why do you do it this way? And you really kind of get that philosophical aspect and deeply feeling into it. Then you understand the how. What is the logic behind it? What is step 1, 2, 3? And then you get into the what, and you actually really dig into like what is actually what you're learning. And so let me give you an example here. Something I can talk about easily is swimming. I always approach every swim lesson with this mindset of what do they need to know today, right? Now, every swim lesson has an anchor. And I say this as in, it's not a permanent thing, but it is what they are during that time. So I'll do a test. I'll evaluate what they know, how are they reacting to my stimuli, my questions. And I ask, like, what are you trying to learn? Like, why are you trying to learn it? Blah, 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 blah. And I can tell from doing those different tests, are they a what? Are they a how? Or are they a why? And why is the philosophy, the how is the physics of swimming, and the what is the psychology. So like, how are they thinking? And so by doing so, I can actually change my teaching approach to understand how am I going to convey the information best to them. Sometimes they are an adult, not afraid, so the psychology is not really there, and they don't necessarily need to think about it very much. They just want to do it. And so they're very focused on just doing. So they need to know, first off, sometimes it is what, like they need to know what they need to do. They have no knowledge. But if they have some knowledge, then it usually is how. Here's step 1, 2, and 3, and then that's how you swim. And so by choosing which one that is, I can more accurately teach them. And eventually that does switch. And then on top of that too, there is kind of the micro what and the micro how and the micro why. Some days they are learning how, but then they get kind of stuck up on, well, why do you keep making me want to do it this way? And it comes into the why. And like, here's the philosophy behind it. You don't want to sink and you want to make sure you have enough air to last a long time. Something like that. Let's get back to the mind pillar here. But essentially, learning is the forefront of the mind pillar. If you stop learning, your brain is going to degrade. If you stop lifting weights, your muscles are going to start to degrade. It's the same thing. Now, this channel started out with self-education as its forefront. I started this do-it-yourself degree. I now call it the modular degree, and that is part of the PIOS itself too. And so self-education is the foundation of the mind pillar. What you are learning and how do you learn yourself, and keeping track of that all. And I think that lifelong learning is key to humanity. Like, that's really, as bold as that statement is, I think that every single person should be self-educated. They should be teaching themselves. They should be encouraged to learn. There is the whole mindset between like the sheep and the people who are the black sheep, and the black sheep are more likely to be self-educated and teaching themselves, and that's why they don't want to follow the herd. But I don't think it's just that. I think everybody should be self-learning. And I think that everyone sort of does, but the amount of what you do changes. And that's what differentiates the black sheep from the herd. And so I think that whenever you are creating your own future and you want to know certain things down the line, you're starting to plan out what you want to learn, that is an act of foreshadowing what you are going to be down the line. You are building up that mind pillar by learning and figuring out how to learn. Learning is a skill in of itself. And you kind of quickly get to that when you become an autodidact. And it's kind of hard because you have to like learn, how to unlearn, how to relearn. And what a lot of people forget is that our memories kind of suck. Our organic computer up in here cannot learn stuff and keep it forever. And so while we do recall a lot of things, we often recall wrong. We might recall partially. And so by repeating and relearning what you've learned, it helps cement that for longer. And so there's kind of this exponential curve. So whenever you are first learning something, you need to repeat it a lot, and then you can repeat it every week, then every month, then every year, and eventually it just kind of sticks. And if you lose some, you only lose about 10% or something like that. And so it's not a big deal, but that's only after you've done it for so long. And that's why we repeat a lot of stuff in school. And it kind of gets into the whole rote learning and rote memorization, but I don't think that's quite what we're talking about here. Next is learning past the plateaus. So one thing I like to talk about is skill tree based learning. And this is something that I've talked about on the channel. You can go check out some videos on it on the channel. However, no one's really talking about this concept, and I think it's perfect for modular education, which is what the modular degree is all about on this channel as well. But I don't want to get into that today. Point is, skill tree based learning is a concept that I coined from video games. So when you're playing a video game like Spider-Man and there's a skill tree, you have the chemistry for, Peter Parker, you have the web slinging for Spider-Man, and then you have the combat for obviously Spider-Man as well. So you have 3 different areas of expertise that Peter Parker Spider-Man has. Now when you're playing the game, you can do more chemistry, which will help, boost your attacks or maybe your web slinging or something like that. You have your web slinging, so there's the skills of actually and different moves you can do, and then you have the combat, how well do you fight the bad guys. Each one of these trees is important, but you're not going to just go down just one tree when you're playing. If you do, you're going to be very lopsided and you're going to have a really hard time traversing the environment or fighting the enemies and that kind of thing. So you actually have to jump between each tree over and over and over again. And you notice how my hands were random there too. You're not going to generally be just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It's going to be jumping around. Skill tree based learning is very similar, especially for neurodivergent people, but even neurotypical people, this is helpful because by switching your attention, you keep your attention for longer. This is a skill I learned as a lifeguard. So we had 3 different zones in the pool. We'd only be in each zone for 30 minutes because our brains would start to lose focus after 30 minutes. But by switching zones, you are in a new area, your brain kind of resets that timer, and you can then keep your focus for longer. So instead of focusing just for 30 minutes, you can focus for 90. By switching what you are learning, not too crazy, like you don't want to be dabbling everywhere, but dabbling a little bit is actually pretty good and it helps keep your momentum going. And sometimes, let's say you're going down the combat tree and you're getting stuck on this particular learning subject. By taking a break, if you want to push past that plateau and you want to be able to do something with it, but by sometimes taking a break and shifting focus to another tree, then it allows you to make progress down this tree and, keep that momentum going. And then you've had enough time, to let that slow burn figure out what the problem was, and then you can progress down this tree. And so there's that kind of balance between switching, but switching with a purpose. And I think that the mind pillar, obviously the first and foremost thing you should know about the mind pillar is learning and keeping your stimuli going throughout your life. So that's what this episode is about. It's just kind of a quick overview of what the mind pillar is about. Self-education is the foundation of the mind pillar. Learning is the actual accelerant. And then you have things like pushing past plateaus that allows you to have a real level up and really push your brain to a new level. It's kind of like when you walk into a room and you forget why you went into that room. I don't remember where I learned this, but it makes a lot of sense. A lot of people will just leave and go to the room, remember what they did, and come back. That is a kind of a cheat way of doing it. Whereas you could sit down and actively try to recall what was the reason why you went into this room. It's painful, it's annoying, but it's a plateau. And by pushing past that plateau, you're training the brain to not be afraid of hard challenges. The next couple things before I wrap up this episode is around nootropics. Nootropics are mental supplements that help induce focus, cognition, memory, even just clarity. So sometimes people have brain fog, and that's why they drink caffeine and it helps the brain fog. Caffeine can only help so much. Technically, caffeine is a nootropic as well. In fact, it's one of the most basic ones. And I'll give you this. L-theanine is a main component in tea. It is a relaxation component. It's non-sedative, so it doesn't make you tired, but it helps you relax. When you combine L-theanine and caffeine, it's the most basic nootropic combination. And that's where a lot of people start out. So if you can do that, it'll help you. That's why tea helps you focus a little bit better than coffee because it has L-theanine built into it, particularly green tea. Now, lastly, the neurostimuli. I mentioned it a few times in this episode, but essentially all it is challenging the brain, doing something new, brushing your teeth with your opposite hand kind of thing, and focusing on challenging the brain in new and novel ways. It means learning a new skill. Every 10 years, I often tell people to change their physical regimen dramatically, going from like swimming to golfing or weight training to calisthenics and stuff like that, like big jumps. By doing those big jumps, you're challenging the body completely differently, but it's also challenging the mind because you're learning something new and you have to apply that newness, especially as we get older, it gets harder. And so that's an example that helps both pillars. All right, I'm done with this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them below. I have a lot of episodes coming and I'm excited about it. And I hope that maybe you learn something new. Cheers.